press the Start Broadcast button on the GoToWebinar control panel to allow all attendees to hear you. This system will notify you once you begin your broadcast. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, this is Jeff, the Big Hairy Dog. Welcome. This is Jeff, the Big Hairy Dog. We got 5 people connected, and we have 20 people signed up. So we're going to wait for just a few minutes here to see if anybody else connects. Which is usually the case, although we are straight up at 2 o'clock, so we'll try and get going as quickly as possible. Thanks for, I guess we have 12 now. That's right. Is that what I'm seeing? Excellent. I don't think we can count Claudia twice. So I'm generally of the belief that if you have a question, you should be able to ask it. So I can unmute people, and you guys can mute yourselves. If it's too noisy, I can mute you back, depending on what the deal is. But I definitely encourage interaction, and good questions are always useful. All right, so I think we should probably just go ahead and get started. We've given them 3 minutes. If we're here, we're here, and if we're not, we're not, right? All right, so this is Jeff, the Big Hairy Dog. This is a webinar on Retail Pro. This is version 9. We're talking about purchasing, receiving, and inventory creation. So that's our basic agenda right there. And we're just going to dive right in. So creating inventory can be done in a couple of different places. Let's start with the basics. Inventory And then we would click new and create a new item. Now this is an item versus a style. So and in creating items and or styles or groups of merchandise, you're going to need to define all the appropriate fields, department, and vendor. So we need to go talk about these two probably first. And then how we use our description 1 and our description 2 is very important. And that data consistency is kind of critical if you plan on getting any data back out of Retail Pro later on. So let's just, well, we can actually do it from here. So from here, we can talk about department codes. We can select the department code. We could type one in. I'm going to click the little button so we could take a look at them. These department codes are not, they're not tremendously outstanding. These are just the little department codes I have in my sandbox, but you can see some structure here. So you could have an apparel department, and then you could have like a level within the apparel department, like pants or shirts, and then you could have a gender in this position, or you could flip that around and have it the other way. You could have it be like this. Actually, is men's apparel over here. That's so men's apparel pants, men's apparel shirts, women's apparel dresses. But like I said, you could flip this around and do apparel, men's, women's, and kids up here. The point is to have a plan, a hierarchy of department codes, and we're not really talking about creating department codes here, but that is a long process that everyone has to kind of do a little self-searching on and decide what the right level of tracking is for their merchandise. And we can access those through either the creation process of an item, or you could just go right to them, merchandise departments. Same with vendors. You could go merchandise vendors, or you could access them while you're creating it. And again, these are just vendors here that are in my little sandbox, but you could go ahead and click new and create a new one where we would define a 6-digit vendor code, which is not necessarily numeric. It could be anything we want it to be, right? Now, if anybody has any questions, you can either throw something in the chat, or you can raise your hand, or in most cases everybody's unmuted, so you could just kind of inject yourself and ask a question. I have no problem with that. Whatever works best for you. All right, so vendor codes, we make up a vendor code for it. We put the vendor name in and any appropriate information here that goes along with it. Most of this stuff you can fill in yourself. The ones that are tricky would be like terms. Over here, days is net 30, which doesn't make sense except that if you know that it's 0% discount for 30 days, then it kind of makes sense that and becomes net 30. But the rest of those are pretty obvious, I think. Prepaid, due date, payments, end of month, 10 days past end of month. And these two, of course, these are for returning product back to the vendor. These aren't purchasing terms. And then, of course, your account number, whatever account number that your vendor has issued to you is what you'd put in there. And then these things would then pass over to the purchase order and down into the, anyway, we'll get there in a minute. Let's back out of here. So again, if we're going to create a single item, we would just go into inventory. We would click new, and it would create an item for us. We would say what department this belongs to. So I'm going to say this is a, let's see, what do we have here? Okay, furniture collections. So it's a furniture item, and it will grab a vendor code, and I have no idea what vendor codes are good, so we're just going to go with the vendor code. And then here, let's take a quick look. I'm going to list view. So I'm just flipping my view here with list versus form at the top. And what we see here is we see that descriptions are being written to description 1, and style numbers generally are being done to description 2 in this data set. And these are decisions we make when we start inputting our data. But we want to, again, keep consistency. So if we said this was a chair, right, we would do that in this field. And then down here, we would say that this is a whatever model number it is, right? And then if it has a size, we would give it a size here. I think we all get this, right? So this could be, I don't know, 36 inch. I don't know. I don't know how you measure chairs off the top of my head. And maybe it's a red. I don't know. Cost and order cost. So I don't know if everybody knows the difference between cost and order cost. And everybody sees my screen, I'm hoping. But anyway, Cost is the cost you own it for. So cost is the actual cost. So that's whatever our cost is going to be. But if I buy one for $10, let's keep the math simple, and I buy another one for $12, then I have two. I paid 22 bucks for it. Normally, the default settings in Retail Pro would be set to average costing. So I got two. I spent 22 bucks. My average cost would become $11. Order cost tracks the last cost received and or the cost you'll pay the next time you order it. So that would be $12 in my example, right? So normally when I put an item in, if I'm putting it in for the first time and it's got a cost, I would just put the same cost in both fields because it's brand new and it doesn't have any history yet. Now that department was set to a default margin of 50% or a coefficient of multiplier of 2. Same thing, by the way. So it priced it at $90. Of course, that's up to me, right? I could make it be whatever I want it to be, right? And if I have a UPC, I should put that in. I'm going to click Save. When I click Save, it assigned it a SKU, an internal ALU. That, again, is a preference choice that has to be turned on. But hopefully, if you're entering products, you've already turned all that stuff on, and it's sequencing for you. So let's talk about style views. So this is a single item. This comes one way, and when I buy it on a purchase order, there's options in a purchase order to add notes about trim and finish and things like that if you're a furniture retailer. And so let's go over to the sidebar menu and let's see if we don't have a style view. When we do, and again, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to ask them or raise your hand or just kick one out if you have a speaker and or a phone. So this is a style view, and in a style view, I'm going to go to form, although it'll flip over to form when I click new anyway. I'm going to go ahead and say now new, and this will let me build a group or a style of items. So in this case here, it's almost always going to be something that's style driven. So let's say it's a men's apparel shirt. Shoulders are shorts, nice. That's nice. We have shirtings. That's interesting. Not sure who put that in, but yeah, let's go with t-shirts here. I'm not sure what a shirting is, and so I'll just put in a vendor code that I happen to know is already in there, and this could be a Nike pocket tee, right? And then maybe it has a some order number, right? Now at this point, scales are things that help us keep our consistency and size straight, right? So I could grab a scale like that and it would put my sizes in for me. Now there's a scale button over here on the sidebar menu. It's grayed out currently because I'm in the middle of editing a style. You can't edit a scale and a style at the same time, but you can pre-build them or you can build them on the fly. We'll get over to that in a minute. I threw the sizes in through the scale, but generally speaking, scales don't have colors because every garment may have different selection of colors, right? So on the sidebar menu, we would go to Edit, Attribute, and Sizes, this button in the upper right corner, and hopefully everybody can see the screen well enough. I could have changed the resolution. I didn't, and maybe I'm feeling bad about that. I don't know. If you do have any issues seeing it, though, speak up or send me a little note in the chat there, and I will adjust it. I'm going to click Edit Attributes and Size. We're going to put some stuff in here. So we'll say we got some red ones, and we got some white ones, and we got some blue ones. And click OK. So that inserts our colors on the side of the grid. Now up here, let's go ahead and give it a cost. And it went for a straight 50% margin. Rounding is not turned on, but let's say I wanted to charge $17.99, right? That's my choice. Then down here, what I would do is I would go ahead and define these grid points. Now I'm directly in inventory, and normally when you're directly in inventory, you wouldn't just key quantities directly in. So I'm just going to put some zeros in here. We'll get to the purchase order thing in a minute. And so if I did not want a particular size color combination, I would avoid putting a 0 there. So, and notice that I'm going left to right, top to bottom. I'm starting with the smallest size for each color, and I'm going across the style grid to populate the style. I'll show you why in a second. So let's go ahead and say save. So let's go back to item view, and let's just take a look at, let's go ahead and say that, I think this is N1J6. All right, so what I want you to notice is that the red are all together by size, right? That this one is skew is smaller than this skew, that it's being displayed the way I want it to be displayed. So when you type it in left to right, it gets that that's supposed to display in that method. So if you do all the smalls, then do all the mediums, then it's going to display all the smalls and then all the mediums and all the larges. And I prefer, when I'm looking at it, I'm just browsing in inventory and I filter for it, I prefer if it comes up in the right size run. It's this trivial little point, but I think it's useful if you're building styles. I think it's very useful to see that. Nice. Thank you, Renee. I appreciate the comments. Yeah, sometimes the Retail Pro goes wacky, and there are some differences. Whether you have a scale or not, and things like that, can determine whether how it looks. Well, the item numbers aren't in direct order here, but they are. What's important here is that this item be smaller than this one here, and this one be smaller than this one. I guess if that makes any sense, because this is not sequential here. I'm not sure why it skipped over those SKUs. Maybe those SKUs were used, but now it doesn't look like it, because here's 32 down here, 33 and 34. Now, in our filtered view, let's see if this works. I mean, clear all. So N1J6, I think that's what I put in there. So in here, let's see if I can say that I would like to sort these by the style and then by the color. Now, if we chose size next, I think we're going to blow up. So this puts them in the wrong order, right? It puts all the blue together, but starting with the wrong size. So let's go back to modify filter, and let's change number 3 here to be the ALU. Let's see what happens. So let's see what that does. So you see what it did. It put them small, medium, large, extra large. It put them in the right run. So if you're adding items all at once, then I strongly recommend you go left to right across the grid, if you see what I'm saying. It's like do one color, small to all the way to extra large or whatever size you're stopping at, then drop down to the next color and go left to right, because you can get them to display in the right order. Now, that being said, there are many times when, that's just not going to work out, that, you build a run and you have that run in there. I'm not sure why I'm on a totally different item. That's nice. But then at some point you need to go and add another size, right? I need to add this size over here. It's going to have a totally different SKU number, right? I mean, you added this 6 months ago and your sequencing now is 6 months later. So, it's not going to line up. There's nothing you can do about that. So I guess when you're building a new one, and you have a scale that you attach down here, whatever that scale might be, then if there's a chance that you're gonna sell that, I would put a 0 on it, right? I would build it in the order and have it ready to go. If there's relatively no chance, then I have to agree I would skip it and not define it, and it may end up being out of order if you have to edit later. So not sure what you can really do about that. All right, let's cancel this here. Okay, so let's see what our little thing says. So advanced inventory is next on our agenda here. So non-inventory and price levels are all good things. Let's just go ahead and take a look at this non-inventory thing. So non-inventory is just a mark, a checkbox, I guess I could say. It just changes an item from being tracked. So items that have an on-hand, when you sell one, their on-hand changes. Items that are checked off as a non-inventory item, when you sell one, it does not change their on-hand. So what is a non-inventory item? Well, waxing a set of skis. If I have a SKU and I scan it to sell a service like gift wrap or waxing skis or anything like that, right? Where I sell it over and over and over again, but I never receive it, that's a non-inventory item. So you can build a SKU for it. You can create a barcode. You can do alternate lookups. You can do multiple, like secondary alternate lookups. You can have different ways of bringing that item to the screen where you could type a secret shortcut or scan a barcode, but it wouldn't change the quantity, basically. If this thing's checked off as non-inventory, then that SKU right there will always be 0. I mean, I could go test it for you guys, but I know it works, so I don't know that we want to spend a lot of time on a simple concept like that. All right, so then price levels. Price levels is kind of a big open-ended box that can kind of go crazy on us if we're not careful. But this is our price levels box in this particular screen design. Many times you'll see like I say, a price cost tab. This is a price cost purchasing tab, but same thing. You got a price level box in here. And in a price levels box in version 9, you can down arrow and you can pick another price level, and you could then go ahead and put a price in there. So compare at $25.99 or whatever, right? So you can have different price levels for different things. So I've got a bunch of price levels typed in here because I do a lot of work in this sandbox for various scenarios. So things you can use price levels for, right? That's maybe more important than price levels themselves. You just build them in preferences. You just go turn them on and give them a name, and boom, they exist, and then you can start using them. But you could use price levels for compare at or original or what they call MSRP, any version of that, right? Now that's a pretty easy price level. If you're using price levels, that's not a bad one because it's easy to maintain. And that's really my key concern with price levels is if you have a price level, you have to maintain it. That means every item is going to have 2 prices, right? So with a compare at or original price, once you put the original price in, you're probably not ever changing it. Unless it goes up in price, which it could. But many items that are introduced, they sell through that season, then they're discontinued, and you go on to something new next year, right? So the original price is put in once, and it's never have to be maintained again. It's just a creation piece. So that in that respect, that's nice. And of course, that becomes very useful if you're doing markdowns downstream and you're taking 10% off the original price. Then you can take 20% off that same original price again because you have it written down in the background. You could also use price levels for customers. Like I could have a customer and I could assign a customer to a price level. So now this one's a little trickier because prices of items change. So if the customer price level is like a discount price level of some kind, the reason you'd use a price level to do a discount would be that some items get discounted and some items don't. So you've got to then have a way of going out and refreshing those prices, right? So I could assign a price level to a customer. but you'd have to have some way of managing that process. You follow? So I would want to have out in inventory like a field set up for the items that don't get discounted. So that in using the price manager, which is not a webinar about price managers, but there is such a thing as a price manager right here in inventory, and I could adjust prices. But what I'd want to do is I'd want to do a filtered view, and I'd want to have a field somewhere where I said, clear all here, where I said in no discount items, for instance. If I had no discount mark in a certain field, I would say, look, exclude the no discount items, and then let's go ahead and write these at a 10% off, and then take the no discount items and bring them in at full boat, if you see where I'm going there, without having to go too deeply into the weeds. So another usage of price levels would be what's called price-based stores. So instead of assigning a price level to a customer, you could assign a price level to a store. So if you have more than one location, then in system preferences under stores, you can specify what the default price levels are. And see, so you turn on price-based stores down here, then you have to specify what the price level they use is. So you could have, an item that sells for a certain price in town, but if you have another store up on a lake and you buy the same item up at the lake, hey, you pay for the premium of us shipping up there and us maintaining it up there and having it be convenient for you, right? So now another thing too that I'm going to go back to that original price for just a quick second, since we're in system preferences. In system preferences, under discounting, you can specify the original price field. So if I were to say bring the original price from my original or compare price, right? Then when I go to sell an item that has more than one price, so if I take this first item, what is this first item? Let's see. Oh, we got all kinds of stuff. So all right, that'll work. So you see here, it's got a compare at price that's different than the retail, right? And it's got a UPC. So we're just going to go ahead and grab that UPC, copy it, and pop out of here and go try this and see what happens, right? So beep, scan the item and see what happens. It comes up at 17.95% discount automatically because I gave the computer the numbers and the computer can do the math, right? That's all that is. However, that's very handy. Now, some people like to do that, but some people will, in fact, not support it all year. Like they'll go in, they'll use the price manager to copy their retail prices over to original. They'll turn that switch on. Then they'll go take a planned markdown for next weekend or something where everything's going to be on sale. And then at the end of the sale, they'll go into system preferences and turn the original price back to retail and then not worry about the original price field for till next year when they do the sale, right? All right, so multi-vendor, let's take a quick look at multi-vendor. Multi-vendor is a very powerful feature. Obviously, based on the name, multi-vendor is intended, let's see if we can find the multi-vendor box, here it is. It's intended to be a field where we can supply a secondary vendor. So if JS is our vendor here, I could then turn around and say, yes, but I can also buy it from somebody else, right? That's the point. And then I could have a secondary like order cost here too, right? So that is one use of the multi-vendor box. And probably the most, well, not the most common actually, that's in the intended use, shall we say. Here on the UPC or ALU field, I could also supply ALUs or UPCs. So for instance, another example might be that I got a little rack of sunglasses. It's a tourist location. These they're 20 bucks. And I don't track all the UPCs because I don't want to. The vendor gives them to me assorted. I just scan them in. So in that scenario, I would scan in my UPCs. Okay, duplicate, nice. I must have used that one before, huh? So I would scan in my UPCs, and it would just let me keep scanning these in. You see what I mean? And then all of them would sell out of the same generic SKU. Doesn't matter which one I scan. It's all selling this one item that I've defined up here. And that's actually probably So that's maybe more common than the multi-vendor function. Is that I don't choose to track color or size on this particular item, and I want all the UPCs to work. Put them all on one SKU. All right, so serial number and lot number, that's a tricky one. I will touch on it, but I don't know if anybody actually uses serial numbers or lot numbers, but I will give you a definition of them so we understand that, right? So serial number, serial type is a field that lets us turn on serial number tracking. Now, the only people I know that use serial number tracking are people that are required to use serial number tracking. So if you sell handguns, the federal government says you have to track the serial number in and out. That would be considered full track. If you sell bicycles in the state of California, the state says you got to track the serial number when you sell it, but you don't have to track it when you receive it. That would be a partial track. And there's preferences that govern when it prompts on a partial track. So I would turn off all the prompts except for the receipt because I don't care when I'm receiving it, if that makes sense. But this means you're going to have you're going to scan the item, and it's going to prompt you for a secondary scan, and you're going to have to scan in or key in the serial number, right? So it's going to slow you down at point of sale. So if there's a need, it's a sweet feature. Works really well, actually. But it is a two-step process, so I'm always reluctant to turn that on unless there's a definite need. And the lot numbers, the other point that we're supposed to go over, lot numbers are tracking numbers for lots of product that expires, typically pharmaceuticals like drugs. So if you have some kind of painkiller that is that you have 3 different lots of them and they're expiring on 3 different dates, right? Then you would input those lot numbers into Retail Pro, and then when you scan that item out, it would say what lot number it is, just like a serial number field would pop up and prompt you for the lot number, and you'd have a secondary scan. And if it was expired, it would stop you from selling it. So that one is that's a little work to maintain and to administer, I shall we say. It's been an awkward one. If you need it, it's sweet, but I've set up a lot of shops that have like a little side snack area, and some of the items in there do have expiration dates, but they can just walk up to the shelf and they can see which ones are expiring. They don't need to track it in Retail Pro. Unless there's a legal reason, like a pharmaceutical, there are legal requirements to track it. So, and the liability for it is pretty rough too. Sari, so you use bikes. Yes, and you have to use it for bikes. If you're in a lot of states, not just California, they want you to use it for bikes. And it is a good thing for bikes. I would agree. For bikes, it's nice to be able to run a report and go search and see who bought that bike. And if the cops bring it in and say, here's the serial number, and you can produce a record of who bought it, that makes you be the hero. Kind of cool. I definitely agree. In bikes and in handguns, I'm not sure they go together well. I guess you could have like a riding shooting thing, but I don't think that would work out real well, especially with other riders. Okay, so count sheets. Count sheets is not really a feature of RPro. It's kind of something I made up, and it just kind of blew up on us and expanded into a billion things. So if we take something like this here and we copy this and throw this into our description field here, so we can get a smaller view. So I'm not looking at the entire inventory, right? And I click print up here. See if I got these loaded. I'm going to be embarrassed if I don't. I do. I'm impressed with myself. All right, so this is just a doc design. That's all that is. It's just a trick of using Retail Pro's Doc Designer. I went in and designed this for a particular client in San Diego that happens to work at a stadium for a Major League Baseball team. And of course, it works much better if you actually say you want to see all the items, which is a mistake I make quite often, actually. So we're going to say all listed records, kind of an important little switch. And it basically shows you all the items you just asked for, right? And a little count sheet with the price and, the quantity. Somebody's modified this one. Usually the count column would not have a count in it. But you get where we're going with this, right? We got the store location on the top. We have a field where we can make a count ourselves. We have a list of items. So if you have to do a floor count on something, we have versions of this that are out there that are pretty cool. And speaking of that, we have other versions of this. Like this is another version that I made for some ladies up in British Columbia because they wanted to be able to box up items and then have a count on the outside of the box so that they could take inventory with it. So here you see it's got a description of every item that I filtered for and a barcode, and I could put a count next to it. Then I could place this on the outside of the box and seal the box. And if I was taking physical inventory, I could just scan the outside of the box and enter my counts. So it's a pre-count form is what it is. It also works for really excellent for seasonal items that you box away and then you want to know what's in each box at a glance. So there's just a lot of different tricks we can do in printing out items in this whole area. So nice. So here I should have said all listed records, but you get what's going on here, right? I'm listing out all the price levels sideways, or I could stack them, whichever. And that's all these are. They're just different ways of doing little tricks in here. This is a markdown sheet. It's pretty handy if you're taking markdowns. There's no markdowns in this particular file, but actually there are some markdowns. Interesting. So in this case, it looks like we raised the price on some of this stuff or actually lowered it in some, but you got some negatives and some positives. But if you're doing a markdown and you need to print it out and show people what you're about to change so they can go out and retag the floor, that's what this was designed for. All right, moving along. So purchasing, I guess, is our next topic here. So let's back up to the main menu. Let's go to purchasing. Let's go to purchase orders. And in purchase orders, let's click new. And again, these screen designs are not, these were intended, or they're originally designed for like a Surface Pro. So they're kind of big and bold, and they're not bad looking, but they're not the normal screen designs. And I have been playing around with them with different customers' questions. With POs, we need to pick a vendor, right? And let's try typing it incorrectly, right? I tried to type Nike and I got Mike. But the M and the N are right next to each other on the keyboard, right? All right, so first off, a really cool feature of the preferences in version 9 is what's called restrict vendor. So I typed Nike in on the PO, and then when I clicked out in here to inventory, it gave me only Nike product. So it pre-filtered my view. And that's, for me, that's a very important feature. There are some clients that can't use it. If you have too much mix and match, you can buy any item from any one, then you can't turn that on. Although you can have that multi-vendor box, right? So if you only buy a few items from multiple vendors, then you just go to those items and put all the vendors on the multi-vendor box, and you can have restrict vendor and have multi-vendor at the same time. Most of my clients use this. Most of them have it turned on, and it is very beneficial, especially for a small vendor. So we would put our vendor code on. We would fill in a few things first, I guess, before we'd grab items typically. So we would go put our vendor code on. We would say what kind of PO we're doing. A marked for PO is a distribution PO. A marked for PO says there are some items on this PO marked for another location. So if you don't do multi-locations, or if you don't do multi-store POs, if you do one PO per store, then you would always be drop ship. I guess we'll go ahead and set the marked for. This is the ship to store for the marked for PO. Now terms would have come over. I didn't have any on Nike, so they didn't come over, but I could set some. So I could say that I'm getting some really great deal. I get, I don't know. Let's just give really weird 2%, 10 days, or net 30. Yeah, net 300. That sounds better. The account number again would have come from the vendor database. Dates. This has got today's date for the order date. I could back that up. Everybody knows I could open the thing and I could move around. Right. I could pick a different day. And everybody knows that if I wanted to go, like say I wanted to go back to January, I could certainly click backwards, like 1, 2, 3, 4, right, where I could roll back to January. I could also just click on the month and go right to January without having to click that many times. Same with the year. So you can go right to the year too. It always falls through the cracks. That one does. So, but it saves you some time in clicking around. And also in the date fields, there are stupid date tricks. So if I right arrow over to, I can move around these fields. See that? And once I'm in these fields, I can use the plus sign on the numeric keypad to roll forward those number of days, right? See, so I can just roll this forward or backwards just by using the plus sign and the minus sign on the numeric keypad.
Nice.
Yeah, it's cool. So like an example of how I'd use that is I could go down, I could type a T is for today, then I could hit plus plus, right? So I just said move that forward 2 months.
Thanks, babe.
So anyway, all right. So now that we have our header filled in, we don't have a PO number yet. I could put a PO number in. If I don't, it will assign one. So I'm going to let Retail Pro assign one. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to click out to choose edit items. And out here, I can select. So first thing is to know that if I go out and say that I want, yeah, we're getting a Birkenstock item from Nike. That makes a lot of sense. All right, well, my data may not be that clean. So I could order this here. So I'm just going to do this first. I'm just going to type in a couple of ones there, maybe 3 of them. I'm going to click OK and make sure everybody understands that choose edit items. The choose part is just putting a quantity in the document quantity column. And in this case, the document being a PO, it writes it back to the document, right? Now I could also go to style view. If I have a style view and I want to order them in the style view, when I'm on a document, style view, which normally shows our quantity on hand, will now be showing our order quantity. So I could come out here and I could just make my order by going like this. If I could get my little thing to respond correctly, right? And of course, it makes some sense to be ordering like this. This is the way that you would normally think as a buyer. You order things in a little bell curve, right? So, but this is one of the functions of the style view, is to be able to order in the style view and not really worry about the SKU, just worry about the color and size, right? Now, if I type a number into any one of these other grid points, it's going to create a SKU. I'm in choose edit item mode, and I'm in at a high user level, so I have the ability to edit. I have edit rights. I could build SKUs. And to that point, I could also just click new and I could build, but we already did that a minute ago in inventory. But building a SKU would be the same as we just did a minute ago in inventory. So I don't know that we need to repeat it. The difference would be that typing a quantity here would be an order quantity, not an on-hand quantity, right? So typing a 0 would write a SKU, but not order the item, right? Typing a quantity would both write the SKU and order it. So anyway, so we click OK over here, and that brings all of our items in. Yes, add all items. That's a weird little prompt that started showing up on this version. And I pretty much always say add all items. And then we click OK again. So it pops me out of the style view and then into inventory, and then from inventory back to the PO, and it has all the items I ordered on the PO. All right, so creating with existing items, creating with new items, and editing and deleting. So let's click save, and I have pending POs turned on. It's a feature that you can use if you want to, and it has to do with the rights of the person that's creating the PO. So in this case, I have rights to approve it, so it's prompting me to approve it. And most people don't have pending POs turned on. It's not a commonly used feature. It is useful though for a couple of my clients. It's very useful. So obviously a PO is it's just a PO, meaning that I could go back to this PO anytime in the future, click edit, and I could add items, take items away, change the price, change the quantity. I could receive against it and then go edit it some more. Okay, a PO is an order. So when, this is a trick question, of course, but when does a PO affect inventory? And of course, the trick answer is never. Only receiving transactions affect inventory. So you could have said, you know, when you receive it, it affects inventory, but it would be the same thing, right? The PO itself never affects inventory. Now, well, we're going to get to PO maintenance downstream here. That's like one of the last topics. But know that we could inactivate this. We could send this away and not have it be around. And if we did, we could then go show the inactive right over here. I can see inactive if I want to. And so I could hide or show inactive. So, all right, let's just say we inactivate this. There's only half a dozen POs here, right? Say yes, it's gone. But if I show inactive, it comes back, right? I can reactivate it. All right, so let's hop over to receiving. So receiving is not a PO, it's in fact a voucher. If I'm going too fast or if I didn't explain something well enough, I'm going to trust you guys to either post a question in the chat or just speak up. I don't care. And if you've joined late and I haven't unmuted your microphone, let me know and I will unmute it because I generally like everybody to be all on the same page. You know what I mean? All right, so let's go to a voucher. And let's go to new. And normally we would start by referencing the PO. This is the most common. So we'll just grab our PO. Now I could have typed it in there, but in fact I'm already highlighted on it. So I'm just going to click OK and bring that back. I thought we did one on Nike. Maybe I grabbed the wrong one. That's fine. It'll work. We don't care that much. So it fills in my vendor code for me, but it does not fill the items in because obviously, well, I mean, I'm probably an exception. You guys probably get everything you order every time, right? So sometimes though vendors are less than forthcoming with the items that we ordered, right? So anyway, let's go ahead and let's click into PO items. We're not going to go to choose edit items. We went there on the PO, so now we would go see those items that we had previously selected, right? And then we would be able to select them. So here I could either say that I'm getting 2 of these, and I'm getting 2 of these, and I'm getting 2 of these, or right? Or I could just say, look, receive everything, receive due. Fill the whole column in, basically. Now, this is interesting. So those items there have been received in the past, it looks like, possibly. Let's see, do we have any other fields here? No, we don't. And it won't let us add them right now, probably. It will. That's interesting. All right, so of course, I'm not finding what I want, but there's 3 columns, and they may have been renamed in this sandbox here. But there's order, quantity, there's quantity, received quantity, and due quantity. And I'm not finding quantity due or due quantity here, but there's a field that shows us all that if we want to see it on the screen. Not everybody wants to see all the fields, and obviously we've played around with that here. So let's just not waste time on that. But you see when I click receive due, it populates these items here, but not these here, because these have already been received, basically. Anyway, most common way of receiving is to click receive due and then take off an item or two. If you're short a couple pieces or you're over in a couple pieces, it's easier to modify the few that are in variance than it is to modify every item on the receiver, typically. Then we click OK and bring that back to the nice, doing a little dance there. Can you receive more than one PO in a single voucher, I'm guessing? And the answer is not really, no. I'm not sure what it's doing there. That's kind of doing a nice little dance, isn't it? That's kind of weird. I click on it and it goes away. It comes right back to the voucher. In previous versions, you could in fact do that. But what you did is you basically referenced the PO and then you grabbed some items from that PO. Then you changed it and referenced a different PO. And that's where it blows up. On version 9, once you reference the PO, you can't reference another PO. So it will not let us bring items from more than one PO into one voucher. And now the downside in version 8 would be that if I reference PO number 33 and bring some items in, then I change my reference from 33 to something else, and then when we update, it would not update PO number 33, right? PO number 33 would never get that these items were received. And of course, if we're done with that PO and we're going to delete it in 2 minutes, I don't know that we care. But no, I wish we could. Those funny little workarounds for that in previous versions, but there is not in version 9. You're pretty much going to receive one PO. You can only reference one PO at a time. All right, so obviously then, once we have grabbed the items, we would want to know if at point of receiving we had an invoice. So typically we think of this process as being 3 pieces, 3 steps. We order it, we receive it, we reconcile it, those being the 3 steps, right? However, if we have the invoice at point of receiving, which I think is the exception, not the rule, we could combine the second 2 steps. So now it also gets into some logistics as to who's authorized to reconcile, right? If the receiving personnel are not authorized to do that, then you're going to be a 3-step process anyway. But if we did have, like I said, if we had that invoice, then we could look at the subtotal and determine the subtotal was correct. That would tell us that the quantities that we're receiving and the unit costs are all correct as well, right? And if this was off, then before I do anything else, before I do anything with freight or anything with the invoice number or anything like that, I would have to make this number here in the subtotal box. I'd have to make this balance. So when possible, it's nice to now to be able to get this thing reconciled on the fly and save yourself some work downstream. Now, if you're looking for an item and you're off by a little bit and you're scrolling through all the items in the order over and over and you can't find the one that you're off on, because I only have like, what, 30 items on here, but you could have 300, you could have 500, you could have 5,000. I think 5,000 is the max. But if you had a lot of items on here, it might be difficult to find the error. So a nice trick is you could place this on hold. Then you can go to the held menu, and in the held menu you can print this out. And once it's printed out, then you could sit down with a both the invoice and our doc next to each other, and you could start crossing off the ones that are correct, right? And then you'd be able to, whatever you're left with, that's what's wrong, right? And then of course, once you find your answer, you could then come back here and just highlight that transaction and click edit, or the unhold button, whichever, to bring it back to active. And then you can make your corrections and finish it up. If you do make your corrections, if you do have your invoice, you make this balance, then you would want to go ahead and put the freight in and any discounts or fees. And then finally, if you're done then and everything balances in the total field and that's all good, then you'd want to go ahead and put the invoice number, date, and amount in down here. And that would be saying to Retail Pro, this is done, it's been reconciled. And if you use the accounting link, it would now be eligible to link. So these fields down here, they are the gatekeeper. They do not allow a voucher to post into accounting if they're not populated, which makes sense because if you post a pre-reconciled voucher and it's wrong, then you got to go fix it now in the accounting software as well as in Retail Pro, and it just makes more work, right? So normal procedure would be that we wouldn't have the invoice at point of receiving. There's a few exceptions to that, but most of my clients don't have it. So most of the time we are just going out to update all print update or update only, right? And it then makes, oh, and we have a serial number item on here. How nice. So we'll go ahead and say okay and update inventory. And there's, boom, we just made a receiver. Now, if I got that invoice and I found that the subtotal was not correct on this here, then I would have to make the correction. Now, in making the correction, you guys get that you're not just fixing this receiving transaction. You'd have to fix both inventory and the receiver. So the easiest thing to do if it's in a timely fashion would be to just find the document first, obviously, then click reverse and say that we had a wrong cost or whatever, right? And once it made the correction, so that basically pulled it out, right? I received it, and then I reversed that receiving by posting a correcting transaction. So then I could just click copy, right? And I could now make my corrections. And I could change the cost, or I could change the price, and I could make this balance, and everybody would be happy. And then I could go ahead and post my freight, and then I could go ahead and post in my my invoice number. Now, there are exceptions to that. And the only exception I really have is that if too much time had passed, okay, then I would not feel comfortable voiding a transaction. So if I receive it and then 2 weeks later I'm reconciling it and I've actually transferred and or sold some of the product, if I void a 2-week-old transaction, it looks like I sold it before I received it. So in that scenario, what I would do is I would actually just go ahead and copy the thing, and on the copy I would just flip it to yeah, I would have to pick a serial number item, wouldn't I? I would flip it to return. So the other option is that if you can't void it, because generally speaking, to void or to reverse is same day or next morning. With receiving, you can be a little more flexible, because in receiving, if it's still sitting on the receiving dock and it's a day old, but none of it's left the receiving area, it's all still right here, it hasn't been sold or transferred, then you can reverse the transaction, right? That's the same as doing a same day reversal, if you see what I'm going. But you can get into trouble if you reverse a month-old document. That's not advisable. So now let's go ahead and talk about one other option here in receiving, which I'll just touch on. There is an issue with receiving that has to do with the cost of goods sold. So if we did receive it on Monday, we sold 2 or 3 of these during the week, and we reconciled it on Friday. As of Friday, the remaining product in inventory would now be at the correct cost on hand, and when they sell, they would sell at the correct cost of goods sold. But those few we sold prior to reconciliation, they wrote to the receipt with the cost they had at the moment that they were sold, which is an incorrect cost, and there's now a variance in cost of goods sold. So one way to fix that is to move the reconciliation, shall we say, upstream. So what I mean by that is that here in purchase orders, if we had a purchase order, like one of these down here, I think, right? This is, I don't know. So on one of these POs down here, we could, if we wanted to, we could send this, we could print this and send this to the vendor, which we do anyway, right? We could get from them a order confirmation. We could ask them to send back some kind of confirmation that corrects anything we screwed up, right? So if they change the cost on one of these things, then I kind of expect them to tell me, hey, you have the wrong cost on these items, right? Now, if we get an order confirmation back, we could make corrections on this PO, right? We could fix this upstream. Then we would not have a variance in our receiving. Now, in addition to that, that's the basics right there. But in addition to that, we also have this thing called an ASN. An ASN is an advanced shipping notice. So if I made a bunch of corrections to this PO, changed the quantity where they couldn't ship, changed the cost where they changed their cost, so that now everything matches exactly what they're shipping, I could then say, okay, generate an ASN. Now, once I generate an ASN, if there's a pending ASN and the item comes in, the receiving the order, they could go to purchasing ASN vouchers. They could match up the PO number, right, with the ASN's PO number. Then they could just click generate voucher, and it would push all those items into this receiver. Boom, pre-reconciled. Now they still got to open the box and confirm that nobody screwed up right at the other end, but you know, this should match exactly, because if you took this from an order confirmation of what was being shipped and you made it match, then this should match that exactly, right? Now I'm set up for verification mode, so my quantities didn't write. Normally the quantities would have filled in here, so you would have to key the quantities in or scan the quantities in. You could scan the items, like for instance, like this item here. Let's see, 100956. We go down here, for example, 100956. I screwed that up, didn't I? It's 111 or 110956. Right, so I could just blindly scan everything in, and here I scanned 3 of these in, right? And then on the sidebar menu, there's a consolidate items button that would just consolidate those up, and so we would see just exactly what we scanned if we could find the item. Maybe not. That's weird. Oh, no. Oh, there they are. So why didn't they consolidate? All right, well, I'm not going to waste time on this. I've done this in the past, and I'm feeling very sheepish that it doesn't seem to be consolidating now. But anyway, that's an option. I don't know. Not many people use ASN vouchers, but it is kind of a cool function, and I like to, when I can, push that responsibility back up on the buyer. The buyer is far more knowledgeable about the products and about the costs than the receiving people typically are. So all right, so back to purchasing. So we know that we can create a purchase order, we can reorder existing items, we can build new items on it, we can edit it, we can delete it, we can receive, we can reference a PO, we can receive without referencing a PO. No, there's no issues with receiving without a PO, except if you're receiving a very large order, you're going to bottleneck receiving. So the advantage of POs really is that you can shift the workload to a time when you're not busy, right? I can input a PO anytime. I can put it in the morning when there's nobody there. Receiving happens when it happens. The stuff shows up, you got to receive it. So if you don't have a PO and you're stuck putting the vendor code right in here, and then you're going out to choose edit items and selecting all these items or building all these items, God forbid, you're going to totally bottleneck receiving, and you're not going to get through with this. So on an exception basis, yeah, sure, receive a few items off the cuff without a
I put $250 in your USAA card.
So, so we really already started to hit a reconciliation, fixing freight or fixing fees or fixing items or fixing costs. Once you've affected inventory, once you've credited inventory, you have to debit it back out of there. You either got to avoid the transaction or you've got to return it back out of inventory and then post the correction. That's it. That's how you fix your receiving history and inventory at the same time. You don't want to edit the voucher in history. It will not reaffect inventory. And that's a critical point. I hope everybody already knew that, actually. That's not new, but I have had clients make that mistake, and it's a little embarrassing when that happens. So any questions on making a basic purchase order, making a receiving transaction? All right, so the next topic on our hit parade of exciting topics here is Clean House. And Clean House is a useful tool. It's overlooked far too often. We are always entering new product into the system. That's what we do. We buy stuff and we sell it, right? But somebody has to clean up the mess at some point, right? That's what Clean House does. Now, Clean House is a pretty cool function. It differs though between version 8. If you're familiar with version 8, version 8 had a cool column called obligated, would appear right there. And version 9 does not need this column called obligated because none of these items are obligated. It only shows eligible items. So if an item is on a purchase order, it is not in this menu. If an item is on a sales order committed to a customer, it is not on this menu. So this thing only shows eligible items. Eligible items are items that are not on any order, active orders. They could be inactive. Not on an active order, and quantity's got to be dead on zero. Can't be -1, can't be +1, can't have a quantity in any location. So company quantity has to be dead on zero. With no, you can't have a -1 in one store and a +1 in another one. It still gets that there's quantities there. So that being said, then you would just be able to mark items. So you could just mark an item with a little checkbox right here, and then that item would be cleaned house. If we said, I want to get rid of those items, we would just go over here and say clean, and it would say, okay, clean process complete. Boom, those are gone. Now they're not gone, right? They went inactive, right? So I could go in and bring them back from the dead if I wanted to. So now, of course, here, the advantage of this tool is that you could filter, right? And everybody gets how to filter, right? But if I wanted to filter for a large group of items, I could go filter for a large group of items. I could say mark all, select all, boom, and it would just select all the items that I have found, and then I could clean them all at once. So that's the advantage of Clean House, and of course, you can make this as easy as or as hard as possible, right? So if you have season codes, and if you have, you can use vendor codes, department codes, you can use all kinds of good things to find these items that you need to get rid of. And the more work you put upstream, the easier it is to clean them out downstream, right? I know I'm preaching to the choir on that one, probably, right? All right, so okay, so in my list it says the importance of using when to use. Well, the best time to use Clean House is after physical inventory. I'm going to say that if you go count the stuff and you know how many you have and you're 99% accurate on your quantities, that's the moment to run Clean House. And of course, deleting them individually is just inactivating them in inventory, right? That's all that is. And we already looked at deleting them with a filtered view, so let's talk about PO and or SO maintenance. So POs, let's go talk about POs. So any PO that is received, right? So if our due quantity here is 0, if we ordered 60 and we received 60 and our due quantity is dead on 0, I don't need that PO anymore. It should be inactivated, right? So we could certainly go and inactivate these one at a time, and that's not bad. I don't have a big problem with that. I could also reactivate them if I inactivate it and then some backordered items show up. Boom, I could go reactivate it, receive against those, and then re-inactivate if I want to, right? So now, if you're a buyer and you're writing orders, you need to manage your orders. We used to run reports for this kind of stuff. We really don't need to run reports anymore because this screen here in Retail Pro with the filtered view has gotten to be so powerful that we really don't need to do that. See, so we could go in and say, look, you know, from the beginning of time, essentially through a given date, right? Show many things that are past cancel, right? From any vendor or from everyone, right? Or I could even do this by associate. I could add the associate field and put my name in there, and I could be the buyer. That did not work out real well for me, which means that there's something else in that filter that I'm missing. So we're going to go ahead and say clear all, so we don't. So cancel date. Do we have cancel? We don't have too many cancel dates, do we? That's interesting. So let's switch it up here. Let's go to design mode. Let's pop over to the ship date. I'm not sure why ship date's not in these things by default. I kind of like ship date better than cancel date. So if I wanted to say show me things that are past cancel, so 010101 T enter, right? See what we got. So everything in there is past ship. So if it's past ship, you know, it should be have been received against, or should be we were expecting it soon. And we could also say past cancel, and if we have items that are in fact past cancel, they show up. You know, a PO should never be past cancel. You know, if you received it in a timely fashion on or about your ship date, then it shouldn't make it another 30 days or whatever the cancel date is, right? So it should have been inactivated long before then. So the point is you can inactivate these. You can run a filtered view. You can inactivate this one. You can go, oh gosh, we haven't received anything against this one yet. What the hell's going on with that? You can go to form view. You can call the vendor. The vendor could say, oh yeah, I'm sorry, we haven't shipped that yet, but we're going to ship that right away. Go ahead and change the ship date to whatever you want to change it to, right? So here I'm able to do maintenance on these as I make decisions about them. So whereas I could run a report and I could list all these out on paper, that wouldn't do me any good on doing the maintenance that I need to do to. If I'm communicating with the vendors and I'm adjusting things like ship dates and or cancel dates and or whatever I'm doing, just do it real time on the screen, right? Seems easier to me anyway. Now, you know, your mother doesn't work here. Nobody's going to clean your mess up. You know, if you don't delete these out, you're going to end up with like, you know, 500 POs in the menu, and your poor receiving guy's looking for a PO, and they got to wade through 500 POs to find the one PO that they're looking for, right? So the longer you go on this, the worse it gets. So clean up your own mess, clean up your POs as you go. You can have the receiving guys inactivate them. You can inactivate them. The buyer should be reviewing their orders. They should know what's there. With if the vendors are not shipping in a timely fashion, we definitely need to know that. So really, so and the last item on our list here is using the technician's toolkit, which might be beyond the scope of a normal training session. But there are some tools in the TTK, or what's called the technician's toolkit, that give you some access to do some things that are above and beyond. And I think what we're referring to here is that that there is the ability to go down here in what's called archive and purge. So at some point, if you've been writing POs for 5 years and you just don't care about the POs that are 5 years old, you could archive them off, and archiving them off would generate a file, and then you could purge them. So that's what this module does here. So you can say what you want to archive and purge. You can say include POs for that subsidiary, archive and purge or purge only, and say what your filter criteria is going to be. And I've used this purging tool. It actually works quite well. But understand that this is not inactivating data, right? This is removing data from the system. So those, if you don't archive them, if you don't write a copy of it that you could restore should you want to get that data back, then the data will be gone. So this was, I mean, honestly, this is not something you use every year. Even you might go 3 or 4 years and then decide to purge some data, and then 2 or 3 or 4 more and purge some more data. You know what I mean? So I would say with this one, what you do is you set your preferences up and you set your date ranges up and things like that, and then you pop back up to the top there, and on the top, then you click start, and it fires off a batch and deletes it. If you have multiple stores, it sends that purge command to the stores, and there is a polling setting that causes that command to go. So, if this is something you're seriously considering doing, I would probably recommend you set up a personal training, and we go through and we set it up and actually run it. I don't really know of anybody that's had to do any purging much. I've used it just because I screw around we're doing some training and we're building some wacky data, and we just want to get rid of the wacky data so we can go live. That's what I've used it for mostly. So I'm a little concerned about giving you guys too much information and making you too dangerous with that feature, because you could actually take data away and have it be gone forever. And then you'd have to go to your backup to restore it. And if you've made a new business, then you're mixing an old backup with new business. That gets to be a dicey proposition. All right, so that's really the whole list of things I have that we're supposed to cover, and we were supposed to cover it in an hour, and it was a little more than we could get through in an hour. So we're a little over an hour, and I appreciate you guys' patience. But I have more time. I'm scheduled out for more than this because we never get done in an hour. Is there anything else, or any other questions, or any other topics that we want to go, or I could clarify better? I'm going to take that as a no. So I appreciate you guys joining today. And Claudia may have a question here. She looks like she might be typing something in. Oh, is there a report that would easily show open to buy? And thank you, David. Appreciate it. Appreciate you joining. Well, it depends on how you define open to buy, right? That's the tricky part there. There's different ways to run open to buy. I have some clients who do it in Excel, and they have their own sort of methods for this. There are some basic principles you'd have to observe, of course, but yeah, there probably are reports, but I would have to know more about your open to buy and what you want to see to be able to get that. Yeah. I mean, I've been playing around and doing weird tricks in reports. Now, I don't know. This is like way out in left field, but let me see if I think I have a report I just designed. I don't know if it helps though. Let's just take a look. That's so not what I'm looking for. I'm working on some reports for a particular client up north who might have initials of SN, and they wanted a report that would break out their due amounts for a period of time. And I could do this with receiving, I could do this with sales, I could do this with anything. What I'm doing is math with months, turning months into numbers and adding and subtracting them to parse out the data for a bigger period of time. So, I don't know if this is even answering the question, but I ran one date range. You can see the date range at the top, and it's parsing out what's due by department for the next 10 months. So, yes, I mean, I could write reports that would show you what you've received and what you still have on order. And we have some other questions here. Why don't we have access to active why don't we have access to activate and inactive PO? You should have. You absolutely should have. Open dollars by ship date. This PO is by ship date. That's the shipping date that we're filtering by, and this is breaking out by shipping date. There really isn't any other real date on a PO, is there? I mean, who cares when you ordered it, and who cares when it cancels, right? I mean, the only real date is the ship date. And you should absolutely have access to inactivate or to activate or inactivate a PO. If you don't have access, then it's a security right. And so then I would have to say, we need to look at your security, your employee management groups, and we need to find out, what's going on with the permissions around purchase orders. That'd be my guess. Let's see here. If we say select all, export to Notepad, edit, fine. This is a nice little trick if you're it's not a security webinar, but if you're looking for a switch in security, it's a lot faster to just export it out to purchase orders access inactive right there. So this group, you can see that it's got a 0 right here. So this group does not have the ability to even see inactive. So I'm guessing that your security rights may not be set up correctly. That'd be what my first guess would be on that. And then you can easily find out. All you'd have to do is get somebody to sign in as an admin, right? So in the bottom left corner, I'm signed in as sysadmin, user sysadmin, or you could just have a native sysadmin account, right? There's more than one in version 9. We don't have that Achilles heel that version 8 had. You can have more than one admin account. So so I would say that you want to get somebody to sign in as the admin and see if you can access inactive POs. If you can, then it's straight up security, and you need to have them change it. Because I totally agree that buying staff and receiving staff should have access to inactive POs, because you could easily need to receive something against a PO that's been deactivated. I mean, it's like a no-brainer. I mean, UPS breaks up an order and you get 17 boxes one day, and then 2 days later you get the 18th box, and you didn't know it was coming. You didn't know they broke it up. You thought you were short shipped. You inactivated the PO. I mean, you might have to reactivate it and receive that last box, right? So absolutely, I don't know of any other reason why you wouldn't have access to that function. And as for an open to buy report, these are open dollars by ship date. Now I could break this down further. This one here, this report that I did it was asked of me to break this down by month. So yeah, I could have broken it down by date too. Just make a lot more columns though on the page, wouldn't it? So it depends on what you do. You're open to buy if it's doing it by month. Most people do it by month. This might work. And I can say I could do this with receiving. I could show you what you received by month in each department, or I could break that down deeper too. I have access to the item level data in this report. I chose to summarize it up to the department level, and I'm showing you both cost and price here. Like I said, I don't know if this is even helpful. We also have other reports that could show you more data, like let me go up here. Oh, let's see here. Right, so like this report here, this is one at this is the DCS level, and this is at the D level. But what I would point out is that this is a really big, large SQL package, right? So this thing has way more tricks in it than I need for this report. For this report here that I've laid out, you see it's this year and last year with on hand. I need 3 data types, right? I need 2 sales ranges and 1 on hand, right? But in this package here, I have a lot more. I have a PO date range. I have a receive date range, right? I didn't put those data types in the package, so I just parked the date range on a dead date. You follow? I don't need it querying data that I'm not going to use. So I could, if I needed to, I could take this here and I'd do the same trick we just did with that other PO report, but I could do it for receiving and for sales and for purchase orders and show you what you received and what's still outstanding any given month. So I'm sure that I could make one that meets your needs. I just would need to know more about the open to buy and exactly what you want to see and what column goes where. And Is it the department level? Is it the department class, subclass level? So, does that answer that question? I mean, it's kind of a roundabout way, but hopefully it gives you some kind of answer. All right. Well, is there any other questions? All right. Well, I guess I'm going to tell you guys to have an excellent, excellent rest of the day then. And I really appreciate you joining us. And I really, really appreciate the questions. Participation is important. Great questions always lead to better webinars and more understanding. So I'm definitely a big fan of a combined effort here. So we sort of speak. All right. I'm going to tell you guys to have a good one, and I will talk to you on the next one. All right. Bye-bye.